Please welcome our first speaker, Jason Glickman, Executive Vice President, Engineering, Planning, and Strategy for PG&E.
Thank you for joining us. We know some people traveled here from far away. We know that some of you stayed up late or got up early. We really appreciate it. What I was saying, that I wanted to start by having a reflection, on where we are as everyone here in this room and around the world leads us in this energy transition. By 2035, every passenger vehicle in California that's sold will be electric. By 2045, we'll be powering every home in our hometowns and the entire economy with 100% clean energy, 24/7 by 365. Think about that. By definition, that has never been done before. It's never been done before. It's a huge challenge, it's a huge opportunity, and it's one that, frankly, we embrace. We embrace it in California, we embrace it in PG&E. And why are we optimistic? Why am I so optimistic? Because we've done hard things before. We've done hard things before. If California were a country, we would be one of the top 5 economies in the world. And we didn't get there by accident. We didn't get there overnight. We have a legacy of firsts, a legacy of innovation, a legacy of pushing the envelope in this state for the world. And as California's largest energy provider, PG&E has been there shoulder to shoulder every step of the way. If we look back over our company's history and the state's history, over 100 years, 150 some years ago, the first gas utility in the Western US was right here, PG&E in San Francisco. The first central electric generating station was right here, PG&E, the first one in the country. Fast forward to the 1940s, right after World War II, 1946, the 5 years after that, we experienced a 40% growth in our population in that 5-year period. Imagine that, just in 5 years. We built, I had to triple check this fact because it blew my mind. We built 19 new generating plants in that 5-year period. Thousands and thousands of miles of transmission and distribution pipes and wires to serve that growth. 1969, Stanford University became one of the first 4 nodes of ARPANET, the precursor to the internet. 1985, Diablo Canyon Power Plant opened. Today, it's the last nuclear power plant in operation in California. It's regularly recognized for its safety and operational performance. And we're really proud and pleased that with the passage of Senate Bill 846 last year, that plant's going to continue that performance through the end of this decade. So when we fast forward to today, that innovation, it continues. It continues in different forms, and we need to evolve to meet the changing needs of our climate, the changing needs of our economy, the changing needs of our customers. I talked about how in the late 19th century and in the middle of this century, we built a lot of central station plants. The example I'm going to talk about here is not a central station plant, in case you noticed. This is Bryceburg, California, and if you zoomed out, what you would see is a beautiful community in the foothills. I believe it's on the Merced River, right near Yosemite National Park. It's a stunning location. It's a remote community, and it is in a high fire threat district. In 2019, a fire of unknown origin swept through the area, and it destroyed about 1.5 miles of overhead distribution line, serving this community, this rural community. That community was out without power. We had them on temporary generation for a period of time, and we could have gone back overhead. We could have gone back with hardened overhead lines. We could have gone back underground. In this instance, we said, let's try something different. There was an idea about a concept called a standalone power system is the technical term, or a remote grid. This is not a microgrid that islands from the grid from time to time. This is a remote grid that operates independently 100% of the time. And in the 2 years or so since it's operated with 95% clean energy, powered by its on-site solar and batteries, and 5% of the time it needs to rely on its propane generator. You can imagine this winter when it was raining and cloudy for days on end, that propane generator was important. But 95% of the time, clean, 100% reliability, not a single outage, momentary or sustained, for these customers during that 2-year period. And they're not paying a dime more than they otherwise would have been paying. Think about that. 95% clean, 100% reliable, same bill. And when we set out to do this, we said, this is not a pilot. Sometimes the word pilot, gets an interesting rap in our industry, right? This was a prototype. This was a prototype. We said, we're gonna do 1, and then we're gonna have 4 online today by 2023. We're gonna have 30 by 2026. And we see the potential hundreds of these types of systems throughout our service territory as part of our wildfire mitigation efforts, and continuing the push for a grid that's more resilient and more decentralized. And I will say, as we did this, and for some of our partners who I think are in the room and online, Box Power, a homegrown company out of Grass Valley, California, New Sun Road, Patelco, there was some learning along the way. There was some learning along the way for us and for you, in terms of what does it take to scale? What does it take from a contracting perspective, from a design and engineering perspective, permitting, construction? This is a different way of working when we're working with startups, and we're learning. We're learning. And we're gonna continue to look for those opportunities and those scaling muscles, whether it's on remote grids or any other innovation that we're working on together. Part of what you're gonna hear, why we're so interested in scaling, and we sometimes use the phrase, we wanna be your best customer, right? And we've taken a stand that it's enjoyable to work with PG&E. It's important to scale to have impact in our territory. It's also important for the world, right? Climate change requires collective action. And we're humbled by the opportunity to lead at PG&E in California, but we also recognize we need the rest of the world to work with us. And that's why we're so gratified to have such global representation here today. And what we would offer, if you think about why lead in California, why join us in this journey in California? Well, if it can work here, it can work anywhere in the world. Think about our service territory. We serve 16 million people from the coast to the mountains, from great cities like San Francisco and San Jose to rural areas, across a huge range of climate impacts and ecosystems. And so if you can make it work and scale it here with us, you can make it work and scale it anywhere in the world. Just look at our regions, our 5 regions that we serve. The Bay Area, which draws the imagination of the world, draws people here for economic, cultural reasons. If you wander around San Francisco or the surrounding communities, you'll hear 160 different languages spoken. 160 different languages. We are also the North Valley and Sierra, where our snowpack, especially in a year like this, our lakes and our rivers provide drinking water to millions of Californians and irrigation water for some of the most productive farmland anywhere in the world. We are the Central Valley, where 25% of the fruits and vegetables in this country are grown, and where also today some of the most acute heat-related impacts of climate change are already being felt, and we're having to grapple with that. We are the North Coast, where over 40% of old-growth redwoods live. These are trees that grow over 300 feet tall and live to 1,800 years old. And we're gonna keep doing our part to preserve those trees. And we're also the South Bay and Central Coast. I see you, Teresa, our Vice President of the South Bay and Central Coast. This region is the home to Silicon Valley, the epicenter of California's technology industry with almost 2 million jobs, and it's also a home to the coastline of Highway 1. So when you look across these regions and you think about what is it gonna take to get to that 100% clean energy future? What is it gonna take to battle climate change? What is it gonna take? If and when we do it here, we can do it anywhere in the world. And one thing that's really important to note, we take pride and privilege in being a utility company. and serving all 16 million of those customers across a diverse range of hometowns. Our True North strategy is a 10-year strategy to be the great utility that our customers deserve, that our climate demands as we look to the future. It is a utility strategy. It all starts with our purpose, delivering for our hometowns, serving our planet, and leading with love. It focuses on the outcomes we'll deliver, the behaviors and the virtues we have. Curiosity is going to show up a lot today, I expect. And it's also how we will transform our energy system in service of our customers for that future. You know, I'd note, my PG&E coworkers who are here, this page is quite familiar, because this is the same page we use. We are showing the world, this is PG&E's strategy. It's the same page we use with the executive team, with the board, and the world. And every single day, 26,000 coworkers are getting up and they're working to bring this strategy to life. They're working to bring this strategy to life. And what we're doing here with our R&D Strategy and Innovation report, which you all have a copy. I know you've all read it. It's about, I think it's about 80. How many pages is this thing? 100. Thank you. So there'll be a break. I got to page 80. Yeah, I skimmed a couple. 143 pages. You can read it at the break if you haven't. But what's notable about this report, and Quinn will talk more about this in a minute, is what it does is it takes our strategy and says, where do we need your help? Where are we humbly asking for your help to bring this page to life faster, more cost effectively for more customers? That's what it is all about. We are not starting new lines of business. We're not off doing experiments for the sake of experiments. It is to bring this to life in the next 10 years, which, you know, in some circles may sound like a long time, but when we're building 40 and 50-year assets, you know, 10 years is the blink of an eye, people. We got to get moving. We feel that sense of urgency. So we're grounded in 6 sets of initiatives focused on our energy system and where we need your help on bringing that True North strategy to life. 3 around the future of the grid in supply and load management, electric vehicles, and integrated grid planning. 2 in climate resilience and wildfires and undergrounding, where we see the most acute needs. And last but certainly not least, the gas system, which I would note, if you go through all 143 pages of the report, actually has the most problem statements associated with it. We see the gas system playing a vital role for a very long time, being safe and reliable and decarbonized. And we are at the absolute leading edge of that in the world, and we're going to need your help to do so. Okay, let's get down to some brass tacks, just in terms of how the day is going to go. You're going to have the opportunity to hear from a number of our partners throughout the morning on what they see and how we're working together. Patty's going to share some of her perspectives and welcome some special guests from Tesla, Microsoft, and Schneider. We'll also talk about how we intend to operationalize this strategy and work with all of you. We'll have lunch, then we'll move into breakouts throughout the afternoon, and we'll have, again, for folks online and physically here in San Ramon, the setup is hybrid, so you can join the breakouts, and then we'll wrap things up and we'll have a reception here. So again, thank you all for being here. It's a really exciting new day for all of us at PG&E. We're thrilled to have you all here, and let's get to work. Thank you.
Please welcome our next speaker, Quinn Nakayama, Senior Director, Grid Research, Innovation, and Development for PG&E.
All right. Well, welcome, and thank you for coming to our Innovation Summit. I don't know how I follow up something like that from Jason, but I really appreciate you all being here. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about why exactly we created the R&D strategy and this Innovation Summit, and where we intend to go from here. So, last month we published our R&D strategy report, and the reason why we did this is, if you're familiar with how you do R&D within the utility sector, you can understand a little bit of the frustration. You know, how does this kind of work is, You have a technology or some sort of new gadget out there. You go up to some VP or some director at the utility, or maybe we meet you at Distributech and we have a good meeting, and then we buy one, and we pilot it, and then it sits there. And it's not to say that it wasn't a great idea or a great technology, but sometimes we struggle with whether it's important enough for us to drive our entire utility culture into that particular product. It is one thing to take one widget and test it and prove it out. It is a whole nother ball of wax to get something like that to scale. And through the PG&E and other IOUs investments planning processes, through our GRC, it becomes a real struggle to try to figure out how to get from one to many. In order to figure out how to do that, we wanted to make sure that we weren't just creating solutions in search for a problem. We wanted it to take it from the other side and say, how do we create problem statements that will enable you as technologists, you as innovators, you as research institutes to be able to understand where do we need help, as Jason so eloquently stated. And so we created a 143-page, about 70 problem statements to be able to help really expose where are the areas that we need the most help. And we tied it to the true north. And this was critical. We had to have a true north strategy before we can land an R&D strategy on top of. And it really is focused on the energy systems initiatives. And today we'll be going through how exactly that actually works from a thematic perspective. You're going to hear much more about this through the breakout sessions today. We worked with countless people in each one of these areas and said, what keeps you up at night? What are some of the problem statements that you are looking to make sure that you can either meet your targets in 10 years or even accelerate, lean forward and accelerate into it? And working with countless subject matter experts that you're going to meet in these breakout sessions, we were able to put together these problem statements for you to take a look at. Now, how do you get 70 problem statements to make sense? Is you bubble them up into themes and you find thematic values, and that creates for a little bit more easier reading, and we were able to put that directly into the report. So let's go through this a little bit. The gas system has the most problem statements in our entire report. And the reason why is that we know from electrification, throughput is diminishing on our gas system. As we move from gas stoves to electric stoves to gas heaters to heat pumps, these are areas where we need to make sure that as throughput decreases, we have to figure out ways to still keep rates affordable for our customers while maintaining or increasing reliability of our gas system. And we have had new rules being placed with our cooperation in Southern California Gas and all the gas industry to create a safer system. We just have to figure out how to do this in the most efficient way possible. And that's theme one. Theme two, we know that methane emits from the gas system. How do we make sure that we can minimize the amount of methane that gets emitted from our gas system? And theme three, how do we decarbonize that system? RNG, hydrogen, very popular topics that are happening around the circuit right now. How do we do that, blend it, while creating safety and integrity of our system at the first and foremost? For electric vehicle strategy, 70% load growth on all of electrification, the majority of that happening in electric vehicles. In order to make sure that we maintain rates lower than the cost of gas, we need to make sure that we can actually avoid doing upgrades on our system and making it so that we can maximize the utilization of our entire system, while thinking about the customer and how do we accelerate your journey to get an EV and a level 2 charger at your home, to accelerate our ability to get EVSEs and high-speed fast chargers onto our network so they don't have to wait 3 to 5 years to get their full access that they need to our grid and the demand that they require. We also want to unlock the potential for EVs as a grid asset. We're not talking about just a 13.5 kilowatt hour energy storage that you might have on the side of the house. We're talking about a 200 plus kilowatt hour power plant that can provide both demand flexibility and energy into our actual system. And there is a world of potential when we talk about how we might be able to unlock that. For integrated grid planning, we need to figure out how to take our grid that we have today and be able to get more out of it. The gods of physics will dictate that thermal rating on your system is going to prevent you from being able to push more energy through. Yet we may be able to have technologies that help us through that thermal rating constraint. And we need to be able to optimize. You're going to hear this over and over. How do we optimize where our investments are taking place and create resource flexibility so that we don't have to do all those investments on our grid? Supply and load management. We know that the duck curve is something that we've been able to help mitigate through putting a significant amount of energy storage onto our system. But we know that load management is going to be a critical component for being able to ensure that we're not overbuilding our system. And we know that load management is going to be huge. And if we think about where DERs are going to be, DERs equals EVs starts to change the dynamics of some of that conversation on load flexibility and our ability to make differences on both supply all the way down to distribution. And finally, we need to develop new clean energy solutions, right? We have lithium ion. Now we need to get into areas of long duration storage. Now we need to get into seasonal storage. And now we need to get into new, cleaner, renewable base load that we can put onto the system. And that's going to require ingenuity in how we think about energy supply. And on wildfire, I mean, this is something that we've been innovating and putting research and development dollars in for quite some time. Some of this is not going to be new to many of us, but we need to make sure that we can monitor and inspect our assets without just the annual inspection eyes on site, between cycles, degradation, being able to identify degradation as it occurs on the system. We've been able to do great things on PSPS and EPSS, which are two acronyms, Public Safety Power Shutoff and Enhanced Protection Safety Settings, to be able to make sure that ignitions don't occur on our system. It's not perfect, and we have a ways to go to be able to help that and minimize the customer impacts from when those outages occur so that those ignitions don't occur. But those outages, as Patty eloquently says in so many staff meetings, about make this invisible to our customers. And we need innovation and technology to do just that. Vegetation management, right? Pacific Gas, Electric, and Vegetation Company. I mean, it's kind of a running joke. But how do we optimize how we take vegetation out so that we're minimizing the amount of vegetation that we need to clear for both our customers as well as for the environment? And then finally, the forest. This is a unique one. And the reason why it's unique is a utility's role in the forest management. Our assets coexist with the forest, and we need to figure out a way to make sure that we can manage the forest with our partners, because it's a critical portion of our general ecosystem. And we have to figure out a way to coexist with that as a utility that has overhead assets within those areas. On undergrounding, this is a big commitment to underground 10,000 miles by PG&E that actually can make economic sense based upon, if you think about all the work that we need to do on the overhead system that no longer needs to be done on an underground system. If we can figure out ways to lower our cost per line mile on that system. And that's going to require a lot of innovation, trenching, soil management. And you're going to hear more about that in that breakout session, about how do we lower ourselves down to the minimum amount of cost per line mile that we can do on the undergrounding. And finally, on service drops, this is one of the most painful portions of the undergrounding, is that very, very last segment between the customer's home and our assets. And how do we do this in a way that minimizes customer disruption and minimizes customer pain of doing a panel conversion from an overhead configuration to an underground? We need help here to be able to minimize that risk. All right, conclusion. You know, I had these talking points that I had drafted yesterday about how I would talk about what I thought about why we're doing this. And against my better judgment and with some coaching from my coworkers, instead of telling you what I think needs to be done, maybe it might be better to tell you how I feel. I am one person in a 30,000 person company. We are 30,000 people in a 40 million person state, in a 300 million person nation, in an 8 billion person world. It is the definition of arrogance to think that we 30,000 can make and change and save the world. I get it. I get it. And yet, I left my home this morning with my 8-year-old son and my 4-year-old daughter and said goodbye. And I can't get this thought out of my mind that says changing the world and saving the world is arrogance. We better goddamn try. And I think and here's the thing, I want us to align on that. No. Alignment means that we're just all pointing in the same direction. It is resonance that creates the key for us. And the R&D strategy report and our desire to put to this innovation summit is about resonance. For those of you who have studied music like I have, you know that you don't go to a concert to get aligned. You go to a concert to have that resonance. And the beautiful thing about a concert is that there are different sections of a symphony. You got the winds, you got the brass, you got the percussions, and you got, let me see, what am I missing? Strings. Each one has a different sound. Even within a particular section, we have the violin, the violas, the cello has a distinct sound. And even within a particular instrument, there's harmonies. When you bring all of that together, you get a cacophony of sound that, when done correctly, creates resonance with us as an audience listening to it. That's the definition of resonance. And I look here today and I see innovators, I see technologists, I see educators, research institutes, policymakers, regulators, each one of us holding our own instrument, knowing that our instrument by in itself won't create resonance, but together we have the opportunity to create a symphony of sustainability. We didn't make it to the moon by aiming for the moon. We got to the moon by aiming for the stars. I believe we have the opportunity as a species to create sustainability for us on this planet. And for us to do that, I believe that it requires us to take that next step, to hit the moon so that we can reach the stars right here in the energy market. So, are you with me? Thank you very much.
Please welcome our panel to the stage. Moderator Heather Rock, Senior Director of Strategy at PG&E. Rob Chapman, Senior Vice President, Energy Delivery and Customer Solutions, and Chief Sustainability Officer for Electric Power Research Institute. Leslie Rich, Senior Consultant, Loan Programs Office, U.S. Department of Energy. And Ron Snedek, Senior Vice President, Corporate Development, GTI Energy.
All right, how are our mics doing? Let's do that quick check.
Test, test.
Woohoo!
Can you hear me? I think without the mic, you can hear me.
Man, if those last two speeches didn't get your heartstrings pulled, I don't know what would. that was really amazing, Jason and Quinn. And welcome. Good morning, everyone. I'm Heather Rock. I'm PG&E's Head of Strategy, and I am so excited to be here today. And I'm also so grateful. I am grateful for everyone that's sitting in this auditorium today. I'm grateful for everyone who is joining us online. because today is about how we're going to work together to solve some of these big challenges that we need when we think about California's energy transition and the massive challenge of adapting and mitigating climate change. We're going to be talking today about innovation and how and why we do innovation, and how what we're going to do is different than what we've done before. You know, we used to think that innovation was the work of a solo genius, you know, working in a room by him or herself, coming up with ideas. And you might think of Ada Lovelace or Marie Curie or Tesla. You know, I mean Nikola Tesla. But that's actually not how it happens now. And there is a professor at Harvard, Linda Hill, who does research on innovation, and she looks at some of the world's most innovative companies like Pixar and Google that create, you know, beautiful works of art and technology. And what she found is that innovation happens when you bring people with diverse backgrounds and different perspectives and different ideas, and you bring them together to work collectively on a problem. And that's why we are here today. We are here to work collectively on a problem, on the set of problems that Jason and Quinn talked about, and we're here to share ideas. We're here to agree, we're here to disagree, we're here to understand what we're going to do to tackle these problem statements. And I can't think of a more critical time to be doing this. I'm sure many of you read the news over the weekend about some of the temperatures that we've been seeing in places like Phoenix or Death Valley. I think it was 124 degrees in Death Valley on Friday. Let's think about where people live, like Sacramento and Fresno and Bakersfield. Palm Springs was 120 degrees. That's where our communities live, our coworkers live, our neighbors live. And it's our job as PG&E and all of you in this room who work with us, we have to keep our grid resilient and online and running to make sure that our communities are cool in these climate conditions. And that's why it's so critical that we are here today to work on these issues, because we will not tackle climate change, either from mitigation or adaptation, without a decarbonized, resilient, and affordable energy transition. That's also why I'm so excited that we have these three remarkable panelists with us today. All of them are innovators in their own right, but they also have a proven track record of bringing people together, of working across the industry, of working with the utilities and the energy companies to bring together these ideas so that we can collectively tackle these problems. So what we're going to do today, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and talk about the work that they're doing. I'll have a set of questions for them, and then audience, it's going to be your turn, both online and here in the room. We're going to have a set amount of time for Q&A. So with that, I'll turn it over to Rob for some introductory remarks.
Great, thanks Heather, and I'll be very brief, but Rob Chapman, I'm with the Electric Power Research Institute. I'm the Senior VP of Energy Delivery and Customer Solutions, customer being a key part of that now as we think about the future and the transition. A few facts about EPRI. First and foremost, EPRI does research across the entire electricity value chain. Central generation, whether that be nuclear, fossil, or renewables, wind, solar, et cetera. The grid, transmission, distribution, especially on the system operations today, very important. And then I mentioned the intersection of customer these days and how important that is. We also integrate across fuels, gas and electric being important, and think about that integration as we go forward. From an EPRI perspective, we represent about 450 utility members across the globe. We operate in 45 different countries. We're about $500 million worth of research. And the last point about EPRI, we are a not-for-profit. We operate on behalf of the public. Even though we're primarily funded by the utility industry, at the end of the day, EPRI's credibility to testify in front of Congress and regulatory agencies, et cetera. Like I said, if you've ever remembered Dragnet from being a kid, those of you like me that are that old, Joe Friday, nothing but the facts, and that's EPRI's benefit to the industry. So, thank you, Heather.
All right, Leslie. Hi, and thank you so much for having me here at this fantastic event. Leslie Rich, a senior consultant with the Department of Energy Loan Programs Office. Been there for about a year. Before that, I spent 30 years as an equity research analyst covering the utility sector on the buy side. So, have followed PG&E since deregulation in '97, I think. So in any event, delighted to be at the Loan Programs Office, and what an exciting time. I feel like we're almost at the epicenter of trying to fund the energy transition. Between IIJA and the Inflation Reduction Act, we have over $369 billion of lending authority to help fund innovative energy technologies and the energy transition. So I couldn't be more excited than to be at the center of that. And I'm specifically working with the utility sector as they work through their energy transition and helping them achieve their goals. The combination of tax credits, grants, and low-cost loans are really powerful economic drivers to make technologies that may have not been economically attractive suddenly pencil out. And so we're seeing dramatic interest in our programs because now, concepts like green hydrogen or offshore wind or transmission reconductoring, all kinds of concepts that might not have made economic sense previously. Suddenly, if you get 40 or 50% of it from the government in the form of tax credits, loans, and grants, it really pencils out. So I feel like the energy transition has been supercharged, and it's a really exciting place to be.
All right, Ron.
All set. Hey, Ron Snedick, GTI Energy. I lead corporate development at GTI. I've been here more than 20 years, so a long time. Like EPRI, we're across the value chain. So we're involved in research and development as a nonprofit, make, move, store, and use energy. And we believe very strongly in the dual imperative of not only decarbonizing and getting to net zero by mid-century, but also doing it in an affordable manner that really helps empower the economies around the globe. So it's a really important part of what we do today. Quinn, I loved your saying about the symphony of sustainability. I mean, we're all in this together, and I'm so honored to be with a group of innovators like we have here today. We strongly believe in collaboration, and we strongly believe in taking technology into the marketplace. We do that through our projects, through our R&D, and through partners like yourselves and getting those projects into the market, but also through starting up companies. So at GTI, we actually have 3 subsidiaries that I'll talk a little bit about. One is Frontier Energy that does energy efficiency programs on electric and gas. There's Progeo, which does energy storage and CO2 storage. And then last but not least, SunGas, which is all about renewable and sustainable molecules. So I'm really honored to be here today and excited about your conversation. So thank you.
Great. Well, Leslie, my first question is for you, and playing on a remark you just said about being the epicenter of the energy transition. And some of us, or some of you in the audience, you might have seen the Wall Street Journal article that came out a few weeks ago, and it was profiling the DOE Loan Program Office and its director, Jigar Shah. And what really struck me when I read it is that there was a quote in the article that called the LPO the Clean Energy Bank of the United States, which is a pretty huge role and a responsibility, right? And when we're thinking about accelerating the energy transition, and it's a huge task, right? And so when we think about that role of governments and policymakers, how do we create that ecosystem to foster that innovation? But when you're also thinking about our taxpayer dollars, how are you also protecting against those risks to avoid those future criticism of should we be doing things like this?
Yeah, it's a great question because our role, the role of the Loan Programs Office, the whole mission is to be the bridge to bankability. And the idea there is to take technologies that are proven but not yet at commercial scale, and to really help them get over that bridge to the point where the capital markets will fund them. So as you think about new technologies, you've got a great idea, you've gone through the technical gauntlet and you've proven it. Maybe you've gone out and done some PE funding rounds, you've done some equity rounds. But if you go to a commercial bank and you say, hey, in order to build my first factory to get up to scale, I really need $300 million. And the bank says, well, have you ever built this before? do you have customers? Do you have an offtake agreement? Do you, do you have a supply chain? Do you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the bank might say, no, goodbye, there's the door. Or the bank might say, I'll lend you the money at 15% or something like that. So you're sort of stuck with, I have a great idea, I have some equity, I'm not ready to go public, or may not be ready to go public, and I just can't really get the funding I need at a cost that's reasonable to get me over that bridge to bankability. So that's where the Loan Programs Office can come in, and bear in mind, we can rely on the national labs and thousands of engineers to help vet the technologies. But it also, to your point about taxpayer dollars, is an extremely rigorous process. And actually, one of the benefits, I think, for innovative technologies that go through our process and can make it through, because not everyone does, but those that can make it through, it's really a credibility, because it's tough to make it through our technical review process for the innovative technologies. So it's, I think that article said, they have a lot of money, but there's an orchestra of strings attached or something. The strings attached are that, you really need to be able to make it through our process. That said, we're not unwilling to take risk. So we are willing to sort of lean in and be there, for markets that may not yet quite be fully developed. So an example might be a manufacturing facility, and you say, well, I have a customer for X number of years, but I don't have a customer for 30 years. So is there an opportunity for the Loan Programs Office to say, well, due to our market diligence, we believe there's a market for your product beyond the term of your initial contract, for example. Whereas a commercial bank might say, we're only willing to give you a 7-year loan. We might say, we're willing to give you a 20-year loan, something like that. So it's a risk reward, but we are able to sort of lean in. We have a tremendous amount of technical expertise. And so it's a really exciting place, and some innovators, once they make it through our process, are then able to go get another round of equity funding, for example, because it's a proof of concept in a way. There's also a whole program that isn't tied to innovation, and that's perfect for the utility sector, among many others, and that's the Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Program. And that program, you don't need to prove innovation, but it's for projects that retool, repower, repurpose, or replace energy infrastructure that's retired or retiring, and replace it with less GHG intensity. Or you can take operating energy infrastructure and reduce its GHG intensity. And that program has up to $250 billion of lending authority. And that's so powerful for the utility sector, again, among other sectors. But it's so perfect for the utility sector because the utility sector is the backbone of the energy transition. I mean, we need the grid, we need the transmission grid, we need the distribution grid, we need the utility scale renewable deployment, and utilities know how to deploy vast amounts of capital on time, on budget, and in a very disciplined manner. So in any event, the 1706 Energy Infrastructure Reinvestment Program is a program where a tremendous amount of innovation can occur through the utilities. So we can help fund the utilities doing their innovative programs.
Thank you, Leslie. Rob, my next question is for you. So EPRI is doing all sorts of leading research and development in tandem with the utilities, partnering with utilities and other elements of the energy sector. And we have a lot of folks in the room who might be interested in what has EPRI learned in terms of best practices for working with utilities like PG&E. My second question is, what are some things that you're excited about that you're seeing out there that EPRI has been working on with its partners? Yeah,
awesome question. I'm going to say just from this morning's kickoff how inspiring it is, and I'm going to relate that back to this culture of innovation, which is so important for utilities to establish as step one. And I'll tell you, utilities haven't been historically known as innovators. And by and large, we've been a regulated industry for many years, and now we're in this position where we have this opportunity in front of us. I don't say challenge, I say opportunity. Too many utilities love to play defensive football rather than offensive-minded football. And so with this opportunity in front of us, establishing an innovation of culture that I hope can help support this clean energy transition, that's also resilient, that's also affordable. I think that's number one. And Patty, kudos to you, Jason, Heather, Quinn, the entire PG&E team, because I can feel that this morning that you have it. So that's very exciting. But beyond that, let me cite three things that we talk about in terms of best practices around innovation. One is around relevance, second is around relationships, and three is around results. So when I speak of relevance, Quinn mentioned North Stars. We have one of the most definite North Stars in our industry that I have seen in a long time. We're going to decarbonize the energy system, and we're going to enable decarbonization of the economy, and we're going to do that by 2050. So it's got a North Star, it's got a time frame on it, it's got a measurable metric that we can use to plot progress there. But we also know on top of that, it's got to be affordable and resilient. So it's not just one North Star, it's really a whole bundle of North Stars like Quinn laid out. And what are the specific problem statements that we need to address to get there? I tie that back to relevance of the research. If you can define your North Stars, you can define your metric, and you can define your problem statements, then you can align the relevance of the research and engage partners in that. So that's number one. Two is relationships. I mentioned EPRI as a global organization. Jason kicked off and he talked about all the participants from the various countries. Relationships, it's not only about you as a utility, working with your utility peers, it's about working with the government, it's about working with other organizations, EPRI, GTI, it's about working with vendors, equipment manufacturers, stakeholders across the energy industry. In that broad swath, the more relationships we can develop, the more eyes that we have looking at a problem, the more creative we can be in a solution going forward. So relevance, number one, relationships, and then the last is results. At the end of the day, R&D that sits on a shelf has no value whatsoever. It's not till it's applied in a prototype, and I love that word that Jason used rather than pilot. The prototype to me implies that, hey, we're ready to begin the process of commercializing, scaling, versus a pilot, we'll try it, and if it doesn't work, we'll move on to something else. So I love that opportunity, but the whole thing about ultimately doing R&D, it's got to be applied. You got to understand what the impact is. When I hear Leslie talk, you have the government there available with dollars to help support this process. So those four actually, culture of innovation. Once again, congratulations to PG&E. And then relevance, relationships, and results, three areas for best practices. Things we're excited about, I'll tell you what I'm excited about as a customer. I used to work at PG&E many years ago. And I always joke that when I was at PG&E, and I left in '99, but the customer was only referred to, never as a customer, it was either load or ratepayer. That was the way that we thought in the utility industry. Today, as the customer's at the center of everything that we are trying to do. But it's not only in terms of how we deal with that customer, how do we leverage all of the distributed energy resources that these customers are investing in and help apply to the solutions that we're trying to achieve for customer, community, and overall society. So I'm really excited by the customer and the trends that I see in distributed energy resources, leveraging all those into a virtual power plant, to use that term, but really focused on customer and making sure the customer's at the center of it.
Love that. All right, well, Ron, question for you. One of the challenges when we think about R&D is how do we balance the needs, especially when we're thinking about the energy transition of today's needs versus those future needs? And I'm curious, in your perspective, what are some sources of today's innovation that could sort of be that bridge between solving today's energy challenges and looking towards the future?
Thanks for the question, Heather. So Quinn, actually maybe Jason, you led with it, but most of the problem statements that PG&E identified were on the gas side of the system. So recognizing that part of our source of innovation is understanding what the needs are. So we work very closely with the market, whether that be the utilities, whether that be the customers themselves, and of course the innovators that are in this room, academics, the state government agencies, federal government agencies, and others. And we look for those challenges, and then we look for ways to innovate and solve those problems. I'd like to give maybe 3 examples of some innovations and how they might tie together. So I'm going from memory. I took notes and I left my notepad over there. But so theme number one, as I recall, was talking about the operational challenges and understanding how we're going to get to net zero with leveraging today's resources for clean energy, clean fuels, clean gases, clean molecules, during a time where we're going to see a reduction in demand, right? So one of the things that we've kicked off is a new collaborative. And by the way, GTI Energy does a ton of work in collaboratives. In the last decade, maybe $1 billion of collaborative R&D really around the energy transition. But this new collaborative is called NZIP, Net Zero Infrastructure Program. We use acronyms for everything, but NZIP is all around mapping out with roadmaps. How are we going to make sure that the infrastructure by region, and in some cases, maybe in the case of California, by state, will allow us to have a pathway to get to net zero? And what role does that multi-billion-dollar infrastructure that we have today, how can it be repurposed to carry new fuels, to carry hydrogen blends, to carry renewable gas and other things for those hard to decarbonize markets and for areas where a gaseous fuel or stored energy is really a big part of the solution. The second theme, as I recall, was around methane emissions. And that's an area that we've been very active in. Some of you maybe in this room have been involved with our Project Veritas. So one of the challenges around methane emissions is really accounting for them, right? So over the last, my whole career, we've been worried about reducing leaks. And a lot of that was around safety, but also around the environment. How do we make sure we just keep driving down the leaking gas? I saw a number come out of an AGA report where they said in the distribution systems, the emissions were reduced 69% since 1990. But that's still not good enough. That's still not getting to zero. And I know PG&E and others are on board with let's get that to zero and doing everything we can to stop that. Veritas allows us to have really clear measurement and understanding where that leaking methane is coming from. Make, move, store, use, across that chain, what is that leakage? When you understand where it's at, it allows you to have the innovation and go after and fix that problem. And then the third, last but not least, I mentioned earlier about one of our subsidiaries, SunGas. This is an old technology, so gasification has been around for decades and decades, but now I think it might be coming to its time because we need, at scale, renewable gases and fuels. And SunGas provides RNG, green methanol, or even SAF, sustainable aviation fuel. And those are ways that we have innovations and working with the ecosystem and maybe even the DOE loan office at some point to get these technologies into the marketplace. Because until they're in the market and they're used at scale, we really haven't won.
All right, well, we're gonna get a little spicy right now and do some rapid fire questions. And I did not give them these questions ahead of time. And so a couple words or less. Top 3 places we need innovation for the energy transition. What comes to mind?
The grid, integrating all resources, customer, driving adoption and ensuring predictability of behaviors. And then I'm going to take that a step further in LMI, low moderate income customers that represent 44% of the households in the US. We need to make sure that they're engaged in this transition.
Transmission, 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 and transmission.
Yeah. How do you get the energy there, right? I'll build a little bit on Rob. The consumer, the customer, how are we going to make sure that we have technologies that are affordable that they can put into use at their homes? And how do we do this in a way that we have reliability and affordability and a long-lasting technology? And that's not an easy thing to solve, at least from my perspective.
All right. What is one thing you think is overrated?
Overrated?
And you can't say the color of these chairs.
Well, I'm going to flip that around. One of the overrated hype comments that I hear in the industry is there's no way that we're going to be able to support a clean energy transition, achieve the resiliency that we want, and ensure affordability for consumers. I disagree with that. Done right, this clean energy transition can be resilient and can be affordable going forward.
How do you follow that?
I won't get a round of applause. I'm doing something much more pedantic. Hydrogen for power generation. I hear lots of people talking about hydrogen for power generation, and it's just not the first least cost use. I mean, green hydrogen for industrial decarbonization, fantastic. You know, line of sight, let's focus on it. But hydrogen for power gen, you know, green hydrogen for, you know, to turn, you know, create green hydrogen and then burn it, just, you know, it's a ways out. So I sort of wish, you know, there was a little less focus on it for power gen as a solution and more focus on the massive potential green hydrogen has for industrial decarbonization and hard to decarbonize industries. I mean, we really need to go after that. Let's not forget, and let's not just focus on the power sector. Let's focus on the global, you know, the economy-wide emissions as well. So.
Point taken, and we will not be putting hydrogen for gas or for generation in our DOE loan application. Ron.
We'll keep that one out of the plan. Overrate's tough. So I don't know that I have an overrated to add. I do agree with you. We have to do things that make sense from an engineering perspective and find ways to actually solve these challenges. But as far as overrated, I love the enthusiasm that takes place not just in California but across the country, as we do recognize, you know, what's going on with climate change here and making a difference. And I think the United States is really taking a leadership role in driving forward, and it's really something I'm very proud of, and didn't picture this being part of my career, 25, 30 years ago, and happy to be here today in that.
All right, last question before we start taking some questions from the audience. What is the top thing you're excited about?
Let's see, top thing I'm excited about. I think that what Jason opened his remarks with, that I see policy and regulation helping to drive the change that we need. And I'm going to take that a step further to the fact that EV adoption in California, internal combustion engines will no longer be available by 2035 as a choice. And why is that important? Because I think left to our own devices, it's hard for us to change. Policy regulation needs to help drive some of that change down at the customer level. And I think that given the importance of transport and decarbonizing our economy, that's an important step going forward.
I'm so excited about the transformational role that the Loan Programs Office is having. If you look at some of the conditional loan commitments that have been announced, I mean, there's a $3 billion commitment to Sunnova for, you know, basically government backstop on distributed leasing. And 20% of that will be for low to moderate income customers, with a specific focus on Puerto Rico. And Puerto Rico is a really hard place to decarbonize and help solve the problems of getting low-cost power to residents. And that's just one example of the many, you know, on our website of the conditional loan commitments that we've made that are really, you know, just transformational. You know, battery manufacturing, lithium processing, battery recycling, you know, long duration energy storage. I mean, these are businesses that probably would not have come to fruition without our backing. And so that's, you know, just, you know, I don't take credit for any of that, but it's just so exciting to be there and to see the power of what this, between the legislation and the loan authority and the creative thinking at the Loan Programs Office, like what we can do together.
All right, I'm going to hit this with three things. The first one is around the time has come for technology. I mean, I've spent my career investing and developing and doing things that were new and breakthrough. Example, heat pump water heaters, gas or electric. You know, we've got new gas technologies that are 140% efficiency, which never would have been affordable or realistic in prior days. And that's really exciting that we have that to look to the future. The second thing is around swinging at the big things, the really hard to decarbonize markets, and getting the customers behind that. Use a Maersk, right, as an example, international shipping company that wants green methanol, and they're getting behind that. And that's exciting because that enables technology that exists and enables the ability for us to put that into the marketplace, which otherwise wouldn't have been there. And last but not least is really how do we reuse our vast infrastructure and put these new fuels and blended hydrogen or hydrogen into that and have a zero emission future ahead of us wouldn't have happened without the policy, without the consumer sentiment, and without utilities and people in this room driving that forward. So really 3 big things that are taking place that 10 to 15 years ago, I don't know I would have said that I saw that becoming reality.
All right, well, we have time now for some audience Q&A. If you are interested in asking one of our panelists a question, please raise your hand. We have some mic runners. I think I see does anyone see a hand? We have one right here. And please introduce yourself.
My name is Farouk Harbiye with OATI. In response to Heather's question, Leslie said transmission. I think the focus needs to be on distribution. I think distribution is the Achilles heel of the grid, and we need to put more focus on the distribution side.
Yeah, and I agree with both of you. Transmission. If we're going to bring renewables at scale that are being developed and have access to that power, we need to expand the transmission grid. So Leslie is absolutely right. I agree 100% with your app, because ultimately what's going to enable and empower the customer is a dynamic, flexible, integrated grid. So on the distribution side, being prepared for that, not reacting to that. Now, one of the things that we have today, as you look at electrification of end use, whether it be the heat pumps, the heat pump water heaters, whether it be an EV, or whether it be putting PV or battery storage in your home, we need to be able to leverage all of those resources. So one is to take advantage of the distribution grid, make sure that we're maximizing the asset utilization there first and foremost, expand when necessary, but then also be able to use creative load management techniques in order to be able to support that. So absolutely agree that the grid, distribution grid, is essential to being able to realize this clean energy transmission, that we use electricity by and large to decarbonize the economy, the end use customer. So great point.
I see we have a question in the corner in the back.
Hi, following up to that prior question about both distribution grid upgrades and load management, what types of, not technological innovation, but regulatory innovation is needed to allow for maximal deployment of DERs in the meantime, but also proactive distribution planning, rate making, and authorization, so that we don't run into distribution saturation points where transmission upgrades are not adequately planned for in the timeliness for decarbonization?
Sure. So I think one of the opportunities our industry has right now is we think about integrated system planning. We got to change the horizon that we're looking at. We need to look a little further out in terms of distribution impacts, and then assess from a grid perspective, how are we going to manage that load that's increasing? So I think integrated system planning, and I say integrated system planning, it's different than integrated resource planning that we used to do. That was really siloed. We need to be able then to have a more future-looking assessment of what grid impacts might be, so we can proactively plan accordingly for that. You mentioned regulatory environments. EPRI informs the regulatory construct. We try to point this out. Load forecasts. It's not only electrification of end use. I know in PG&E's territory, you're down. Microsoft is down in Silicon Valley. High-priced real estate. And the utility, when you think about a data center, it's typically they look for cheap electricity somewhere in the country, but they're willing to invest in Silicon Valley, high price real estate down there, and I think 60 to 100 megawatt data center that they're building. It's also that load that's coming on, whether it be around AI and what's going to go on that, quantum computing, but also then the reshoring of manufacturing in the US. So you got electrification of end use, you got the reshoring that's going on. You need to be able to look out for our future, from my perspective, in order to plan for that appropriately. Because remember, at the end of the day, if the customer's at the center of this, Amazon comes to you and says, hey, I need about 3 megawatts worth of power to power my distribution center, and I can electrify my fleet, and you say that'll be 1.5 to 2 years, you're probably going to lose that customer right at that point, and it's going to impact this whole notion of electrification going forward. So I think we have a real opportunity to think differently, but we got to get the regulators to think differently also.
Yeah, if I could just add on that, because I talk to regulators all over the country, you need a forward-looking utility that's thinking about these things. So PG&E is clearly doing that. I mean, that's why we're all here in the room today. Some utilities are not, and I talk to them all. So some utilities are really, and if the utilities aren't bringing it to some of the regulators' attention, they're sort of like, problem, what problem? So leaning into the utilities and then canvassing neighborhood like nobody's business. That's what I do. I work those halls. But just trying to educate the regulators. A lot of the regulators, by the way, are involved with EPRI. So it's not like, they're all sitting there in the dark. But I think oftentimes regulators move at the push of, especially in terms of innovation, at the push of the utility. Like the regulators don't often push down to the utility, you must do this, that, or the other. It's often the utility saying, hey, I've got this great idea to manage this problem that I see coming down the road in 5 years. This is how I'd like to try to solve the problem. Oftentimes it sort of bubbles up. So we need it from both angles.
Yeah, and just real quickly, just to add, Leslie mentioned EPRI and the regulators. We have an advisory council group that of external individuals that can help guide EPRI in terms of our public mission. We're lucky to have Leslie as part of that group, but to Leslie's points, we do have 12 regulators that sit on that advisory council. So they're able to hear about these challenges, these issues that need to be addressed. I will say, Leslie makes a really important point though. Culture of innovation from a utility is going to have a much different response from a regulator than a utility that says, I am a service provider, and when technology is available, I apply it on behalf of my customers or ratepayers. And that's a whole different attitude that is going to help influence, inform, drive regulators to different decisions going forward. So appreciate you bringing up that EPRI's engaged with the regulators.
I love where this is going. It's the innovation of the technology and the R&D, the innovation of the regulatory construct, and I would add the innovation in our planning and in the way that we engage with our customers. And just to give a shout out to our regional service model, and I know we have a couple of our RVPs here today, one of the things we're trying to innovate on is how do we better understand our customer needs before they need that capacity connection or the interconnection, right? So that we can practically plan together to make sure that we are building that grid and that infrastructure that we need. And I think that's another important innovation that we're doing in real time. All right, question over here.
Thank you. This is for Leslie. My name is Paul Noddy with ESS. We're makers of long duration energy storage. And I wanted to follow up on your comment about transmission because I read a report from LBNL that talked about the increasing curtailment of wind in SPP and MISO territories in particular, but that also in California, curtailment of solar 2 to 9 hours a day. Can you talk more about how upgrading transmission and efforts that DOE is doing, the federal government, will help improve that, reduce the curtailment, and bring more clean electrons into customers' homes?
Well, curtailment's a function of two things, right? Storage and transmission, right? So to the extent that there's oversupply of renewables at certain hours of the day, placing incremental storage there such that that can be used, at off-peak times of the day, that's a solution. In terms of DOE, I mean, you have the tax credits for standalone storage now, and we are actively engaged in evaluating long duration energy storage on the innovative loan side, and then we can also fund on the energy infrastructure reinvestment program. We can fund storage if it is related to retiring infrastructure. So an example would be a utility's retiring a bunch of coal plants and they're replacing it with renewables plus storage plus transmission to interconnect that plus demand side programs. So, sort of an integrated, holistic solution. The reason I said transmission is just because of the distributed nature of renewables, and the administration's goal is 100% clean electricity by 2035. And so there's not only a need for vast amounts of new transmission, which is very difficult to site, permit, and build, but also, can we reconduct our existing grid such that it can carry 2x the capacity on the existing rights of way. So, I mean, that's just a real push for the administration and an area that we're particularly focused on.
So we have a lot of participants with us online, so I'd love to take a question from our virtual audience.
Question from online. Where is a majority of the $369 billion in federal funding being spent? Is it grid infrastructure improvements?
Fortunately, that's on our website. It's called our monthly activity report, and you will see in a color-coded one-pager a chart that shows where we're getting the applications in by technology. And you'll see that it is in everything from, we're not a grant program, we're a loan program, so we don't pick winners and losers. We just, as the applications come in, we evaluate them. So what we put on our website every month is an update of the applications that have been received and which technology category. So you can see we've received applications for green hydrogen, small modular nuclear reactors, transmission, EV charging, renewables, storage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see by technology every month where the applications are coming in. That doesn't necessarily mean all those applications are going to get through. So right now there's 151 applications being considered. Definitely not all of them are going to get through. It's a tough process to get through. I won't lie to you there. But you can see where the interest is by technology.
I think we have time for one more question. Yeah, one here in the middle of the room.
Hello, my name is Ömer Karaduman. I'm at Stanford GSB. My question is for the whole panel, following up the type of questions that Heather asked. Rooftop solar, is it underrated or overrated?
Is
Rooftop solar.
Is rooftop solar over or underrated?
I think rooftop solar is part of the solution, but it's just one piece of the solution.
Yeah, I don't know why it would be overrated. And I definitely don't think it's underrated. Especially, I wouldn't admit that to this audience, even if it were true. No, I think it really has the potential to be, if the utilities can figure out how to really optimize it and integrate it into the grid effectively, I think it really has a tremendous potential, especially as we think about, those are scary numbers that Quinn was talking about earlier, and Jason, about the growth in electricity demand. I mean, wow. How are we going to do that? Like, we need the distributed side of the equation to get there.
I think like most technologies, I'd say rooftop solar it really is location dependent at this given moment in time and what fits economically. Here in California, seems like an excellent solution. There's parts of the country where maybe it isn't as viable of a solution at this moment, but its time will come there eventually.
Great. All right. Well, that wraps it up for us. How about a round of applause for our wonderful panelists? All right. Thank you all. I think we're going to take a quick break now.
Welcome our speaker, CEO of PG&E Corporation, Patty Poppe.
Wow. This is a good sign. This means that exactly why we asked you to gather that you are doing. You are talking and thinking and dreaming so that we can do together. It's so exciting. Hello, I'm Patty Poppy. I'm the CEO of PG&E, and so happy. Yeah, thank you. So happy to have you all here. One person likes me in the room. That's nice. I'm making new friends every day. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you, and you know, I wanted to just take a couple minutes to orient. I think Jason and Quinn this morning and the panel were such a great explanation of why you are here and what we need you for. And hello to all the people online. We need you. And we're so glad that you've joined us today, but more importantly, that you're on this journey with us. And I want to share a little bit about where PG&E is and everything that is happening here and how exciting it is. You know, I joined the company about 2.5 years ago. And when I joined the company, we found that we had an organization that had unlimited potential, but was constrained by our thinking. We're constrained by what's been true and what's happened here, both for my coworkers and the customers that we serve. And we've committed to a new and different path forward. And I really want to make sure that all of you understand what it is that is driving PG&E. And it starts with our culture. Everyone told me when I joined the company that we needed a culture change. And I think the biggest culture change that we need here at PG&E is one that is embracing our culture of delivering for hometowns, serving our planet, and leading with love. We say those words because they're intended to spark a conversation. They're intended to surprise you a little bit, like lead with love, what's happening? Aren't we talking about a utility? Trust me, I've had to answer that question a few times in the halls at PG&E, and in the garages and in the shops, yes, and in the power plants. But what we think is so important about this purpose is that it requires us to rethink our future. And so we've underpinned our culture change with something we call breakthrough thinking. And it's through breakthrough thinking, which is where we allow ourselves to consider what's true today as a file. What's true today is just our current thinking. But imagine a future that's different, that isn't true yet today. But we can stand for that future and work like hell to cause it to be true. And so these stands represent those breakthrough ideas that everyone and everything is always safe, that catastrophic wildfire shall stop. That is a breakthrough thought. And in fact, I gathered my leaders early on to start to imagine this breakthrough way of thinking, that it's okay for us to allow us to learn from our past, but not be anchored by it. Allow us to understand our past so we don't repeat mistakes, but we get to cause a different future. And there's no idea too big or too bold. And all of you who have gathered here, online and in person, I know, live that thought. And we're just letting you know we've caught up with you. We too can believe in things that are not true. That we have an engineering culture and it's robust. But we can believe in things that are not yet true because all great ideas are born in that way. All the great ideas that live in this room and online and across the globe live because people are willing to say something is possible that today is not true. And so this notion that catastrophic wildfires shall stop has been a very important anchoring point for us. You will notice that that statement does not say catastrophic wildfires shall stop as a result of our equipment. No, because if we truly believe in serving the people of California, it's necessary that catastrophic wildfires shall stop for all reasons. Catastrophic wildfire can and shall stop, and PG&E will be critical to making that happen. We've learned so much, but we also said the subtext of that is we will partner with the best and the brightest to bring that to life. We know that we humbly understand that we cannot do it by ourselves, but we can be a convener and a driver and a catalyst for our stands to come to life. Each of them is equally important, but let me dig into the wildfire one just a little bit because we've had significant breakthroughs as a result of our commitment to that stand. I brought my leaders together to start to teach them this breakthrough thinking, and I'll never forget it. We came out of a 4-day workshop where we agreed that our past is to be learned from, but it is not an anchor, and our future is one to aspire and to cause. We are not victims, but we are drivers of the future. And one of my lawyers, Bill Mannheim, I say lawyer because it's an important point. Might surprise some of you in the room. My lawyer, Bill Mannheim, came to me after that workshop, and he said, Patty, we have to bury the lines. I thought, oh, Bill, it's so hard. And he said, Patty, I am going to make that happen. I thought, you're the lawyer, really? And he said, you have inspired me to realize I've defended our company. I've been out there. I see what our conditions are. We have to change our thinking. We have to bury the lines. So Bill Mannheim and my chief of staff held a summit. We gathered the engineers, the finance folks, the permitting people, the public affairs people, the regulatory people. We gathered them all together, and we asked, what would have to be true to bury the lines? Well, fast forward, by the end of that day, we had taken a mutual commitment. We'd taken a stand that we would bury 10,000 miles of line. And we knew we didn't know how to do it. We knew that there were a lot of unanswered questions, but we knew that that was the right choice for the people that we serve and the people that we love so much, our friends, our families, our neighbors, who use our PG&E energy and live in and around our infrastructure. And so fast forward, we were moving down the road, we were taking our actions, we were starting to build our undergrounding plan. 3 months later, the Dixie Fire started. I have to tell you, that was a real shot to us. That happened on the Dixie Fire started up in the Feather River Canyon on the blue sky day, no red flag warning, no winds, on a circuit that we had inspected many, many times, vegetation that we had inspected. I had LiDAR photos of the trees adjacent to that line. They were green. A tree on a perfectly normal day fell on the line and started the second largest wildfire in the history of California. And we, for a moment had to just reflect, and we wondered, is this stand ridiculous? Is it impossible? Are we helpless? And thankfully, for everyone in this world and in this room, my team was not dissuaded by that. We doubled down on our thought process, and we said, no, what has to be true for catastrophic wildfire to stop? And Sumit Singh, who is our chief operating officer, was with Mark Quinlan, who runs our wildfire safety and has grown up as a distribution engineer, and they were putting their heads together and saying, what would have to be true? And Sumit asked a very important kind of breakthrough question. He said, look, we have these shutoff valves on the gas system, automatic shutoff valves that when the pressure changes out of standard, they automatically shut. What's our equivalent on the electric system? When something's out of standard, what shuts it off? And Mark said, well, we have these safety settings. What if we engineered them to automatically respond when the conditions are right? Because today, it might surprise you, PG&E has our entire service area, 2/3 of California, divided into 2-kilometer blocks. We have all of the data science and all of the information we have it gathered in a massive data system that can tell us the fuel moisture levels, the wind speeds, the temperatures, the trees, the maintenance log in that 2-kilometer block, and we know precisely what's happening in each of those spots, all those, we call them polygons, all across our service area. Why not use that data combined with these safety settings, re-engineer them for a different purpose, repurpose those safety settings to actually keep the public safe by when something makes contact with one of those lines and the conditions are such, it de-energizes in less than 1/10 of a second. That is now happening on 45,000 miles of our highest risk miles and all of the adjacent miles. And as a result, last year, we had a 68% reduction in ignitions and a 99% reduction in acres burned. And this year, I'm happy to report 50% further reduction in ignitions year to date. So all that to say, that is breakthrough thinking. And when you take a stand, such as catastrophic wildfire shall stop, that will continue to drive great ideas across the system. Now, I'll say we're not stopping there. XPRIZE just announced that we have the theme for XPRIZE this year, for those of you who are familiar with XPRIZE, It's a $10 million global competition for someone or some team who can both identify an ignition within 60 seconds from space and ignite or put it out within 10 minutes autonomously. That's the contest. And we already have 120 competitors from 29 countries who are participating in X Prize Wildfire. Yeah, you can clap about that too. That's pretty exciting. So that's the spirit of what's happening here today. I look at this 10-year True North strategy, and we know specifically there are 70 problem statements where we need your help. And I have to tell you, it's hard for a team like PG&E to ask for help. We think at first glance that's some sort of weakness, but I think it's a source of strength, and it's part of our culture change that we cannot do things by ourselves. We need the partnerships, and you'll hear more about that in the coming hours, about the partnerships that we are building to change the world together and to bring this True North strategy to life. We're closing that gap. And I think of that gap much like I think of the Golden Gate Bridge. Breakthrough thinking is like a bridge from today to the future. And we're on this breakthrough journey together. And, you know, I've been thinking, in fact, just on Friday, I was on the Golden Gate Bridge and just thinking about the marvel that it is and how beautiful it is and how could we even imagine San Francisco or America without the Golden Gate Bridge? But, you know, it took 15 years to convince people and get that thing permitted. It only took 5 years to build it, but it took 15 years to plan it. And so I did a little research on the chief engineer who just relentlessly pursued, dedicated 20 years of his life, Joseph Strauss, to building the Golden Gate Bridge. And he wrote a poem. So I feel compelled in the spirit of the symphony. This morning we're going to have poetry at PG&E. We're going to have symphonies. Okay, but I'm just going to read 2 verses. It's long. You should look it up because it's pretty amazing. But this is a poem for all the dreamers, all the innovators, all you doers out there who have big dreams that aren't true today, but you're going to cause them to be true in the future. Hear these words from Joseph Strauss. At last the mighty task is done, resplendent in the western sun. The bridge looms mountain high, its titan piers grip ocean floor, its great steel arms link shore with shore, its towers pierce the sky. Next part is for all of you. Here's what he says. Launched midst 1,000 hopes and fears, damned by 1,000 hostile sneers, yet ne'er the course was stayed, but ask of those who met the foe, who stood alone when faith was low, and then ask them the price they paid. We are all standing in the face of resistance. We stand in the face of the sneers of people who don't believe it's true, won't believe it's true, can't imagine a future that we're describing here today. But we are standing with you, and I know that because each of you has a dream that can help us bridge from today to the future, and we're so glad you're here. Stay the course. Stand the test of time. Make your dream come true because you will serve people for generations and generations to come. Thank you for joining us. So excited to be with you all today. So now, I believe we are going online. Okay.
Joining us virtually today, please welcome Elon Musk, Chief Executive Officer, Tesla.
Good morning, Elon. Are you there? Hello, Elon Musk. We see your name, but we can't see you. Are you on the line? We are told he is on the line. Starlinks. Okay, production team, how are we doing up there? Oh, there he is. Wonderful. Okay. Hey, Elon, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome. I apologize. I think there's a bit of lag going on because I think it might be as much as a 2-second lag. So just I'm in Italy at a friend's wedding. So.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for making time for us. Hey, Elon, I want to start, first of all, has anyone ever shared with you that you're like the best combination of Henry Ford and Thomas Edison all wrapped up in one? Has that analogy been made before?
I'm not sure that exact analogy's been made. It certainly would be flattering.
Well, that's how I feel today. That's how I feel today, Elon. We're making history here together, and you're joined by hundreds of people here in San Ramon, California, but thousands of people across the globe have joined in for our conversation today. So thank you for that. We're talking a lot today, Elon, about breakthrough thinking and what it means to stand for something that you believe is possible in the face of potentially resistance. Maybe people don't think that it's possible. And I'm curious, Elon, if you can think back, when was the first time you had a thought that something was possible that no one else believed?
Well, I'm not sure that no one else believed, but because I mean, it's usually somebody that believes something, however preposterous that might be. But let's say when most people didn't believe it or didn't think it was true, obviously I think electric vehicles would certainly put into that category. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I think we can turn it up in the room a little bit louder, please.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Elon. Go ahead.
So, yeah, I wouldn't say that nobody, if we're looking at, say, electric vehicles and reusable rockets, I think most people did not think that would happen. A few did, obviously, but most people did not. For me, the technology, it seemed quite obvious from a physics standpoint. If you look at, say, an internal combustion engine car, it needs an electric motor and a battery just to start. So it's an incredibly complicated device, a combustion engine car, and the only reason battery cars did not take off was range. So as soon as you have something with high energy density like lithium ion, and you have now a range that matches people's needs, then there's really no need for the complexity of an electric car, of a gasoline car. So, like a lot of people think that the origins of like my interest in electric vehicles would be environmental, but actually my concern was simply that we will run out of hydrocarbons to mine and burn. And so we need something to continue civilization, independent of any environmental issues. So, and we are moving at this point, I think, quite rapidly towards an electric future and towards a sustainable future. So, I'm fairly encouraged on that front. I think it's going to happen. It is happening. We can always make it go faster. That would be good. But I'm not actually in favor of sort of vilifying the oil and gas industry. We still obviously need that in order for civilization to function, but we should be transitioning to sustainable energy as quickly as we reasonably can. But I think, like I said, without vilifying oil and gas.
Well, and I think that really hits on some of the things we're talking about today, Elon, and the work that Tesla and PG&E are doing together. Just a couple props. As I say, I'm leading with love, but I got to show some real love for the Tesla team, Elon. Our partnership on our Elkhorn battery storage, 182 megawatts of power packs, put in a really smart location adjacent to the transmission system that existed from an old steam plant. Really has been a perfect complement to the abundant solar that we have and the duck curve that exists. We're working on all sorts of things together in that vein. I'd love to know where you think the grid is going, and where, obviously you've made some really big predictions about the 3 times increase in energy demand as a result of electrification. What do you think the role of the grid is in that future?
Yeah, I mean, to be precise, if one looks at total energy consumption globally, in very rough terms, only about a third of it is electricity, and then a third of it is burnt for transport with hydrocar, aircraft, boats, cars and stuff, and then a third of it is for heating. So even if you assume that electricity demand is static, in order to transition to a sustainable energy future where everything is electric and sustainably electric, we need a tripling of electrical output. So you can mark my words here, electrical output will triple. Now, as you alluded to, because of the way that the grid has been constructed to match peak demand, there is actually excess capacity if you run the plants sort of 24 hours a day. I'm not sure, it might be as much as a 2x gain, but it's at least 50 to 100% increase in total energy output if power plants are run 24/7 versus just matching consumer demand. And obviously the reason for that is there hasn't been really, in most cases, a way to buffer energy. And what stationary battery packs like the Tesla Megapack enable is to buffer the energy. So you can essentially run the power plant at its max power output and fill up the battery pack and then use it as needed. So this effectively gives far greater output potential for the existing electricity generation infrastructure.
Yeah, and Elon, we are very excited about that. And we actually together got to do a little demonstration last summer. You'll remember we had the peak event in September of 22 here in California. And as a result of the integration with the already, I call it anyways economics, the power walls that people had purchased already in their garages across California, we delivered, well, Tesla delivered through our grid, 50 megawatts of supply in the peak hours of those peak days. And that's just a start. That was like something we thought together, and thanks to the Tesla's nimble approach and our ability to keep pace, we were able to deliver that last year. And we're continuing to do that now. In fact, last week, my power wall in my garage, you'll be happy to know, Elon, was tapped, and that was good news. We're supplying distributed storage to the grid. What do you think the full extent of distributed storage, and particularly with the idea of bidirectional charging vehicles, Elon? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, I think there's a buffering that is needed, obviously, at the power plant level or sort of heavy industry utility level, which is the Megapack. And then there's also energy buffering that is useful at the endpoint, at the consumer's home or the individual business. I think we're basically going to need to tackle this problem. Like if I leave with one message, is that the magnitude of the energy problem that lies ahead is absolutely enormous. It's good news for the utility industry. It's great news. People are going to use a lot of electricity, like a lot.
PG&E likes the sound of that, Elon. We like that.
Yeah. So this is for sure going to happen. So but in order to satisfy the electricity need of a fully electric transport economy and electric heating, you've got to triple output. And that's just in America. I mean, places that are industrializing like India, I think it probably is a 10x output. So in fact, a friend of mine was talking to me about like some of these sort of fundamental ratios or metrics that are interesting to think about. One of them is total amount of energy per person. And you can include thermal energy and electrical energy, and how that has scaled over time is incredible. So if you said like before the steam engine, you basically just had energy per person would be like, what can you burn with like firewood or a horse or an ox? So this is obviously not much. Now the energy, if you say like total sort of human civilization created energy is gigantic compared to the past, and that number per person is going to increase, I think, dramatically over time. This friend of mine that I referred to thinks that we may end up at some point Well, if the trend continues, that it might end up being like a terawatt per person. And I'm not showing it, like terawatt per person is a lot, obviously.
That'd be a lot.
So you know, big asterisk around if trend continues.
Yeah.
But energy per person over time, it looks like a wall at the Industrial Revolution.
Yes.
You know, and the same can be said for compute per person over time, digital versus biological compute. These are really interesting metrics. So basically, you know, what I'm saying is we need to tackle this from all angles. So that's Powerwall locally, some amount of local solar power. It just helps a little bit so that, you know, one doesn't have to expand as many substations and build, you know, as many transmission lines, which drive people crazy in like suburban neighborhoods, basically.
Yeah. You know, Elon, I think you're talking about something really important, especially for this audience. You know, one of our points of view that we share in our R&D document, we published an R&D document, Elon, that lists 70 key gaps from today to the future. And one of them is talking about the full utilization of our existing assets. And we have a point of view that the decarbonization of our economy at the lowest societal cost requires a much more optimized grid than exists today. And today, we, as you mentioned, you know, we build the whole system for those peak hours plus 15%. And so if we can fully leverage the distributed resources on those peak hours, now the sun stops shining when the sun stops shining, and so we need a resource, and that's where Elkhorn and the mega packs and the residential power packs can play a role, as well as EVs can help to bring down that peak, and not just as we add 3 times more energy usage, not just add to the peak, but in fact, if we can add to the peak less and fill the belly of the duck, as we say, more, then we can get a more fully utilized energy grid, which could in fact be more affordable for customers. They actually could spend less on energy. What is your point of view about that?
Well,
you can disagree if you want, Elon.
Yeah, no, I think there will be price pressure on electricity because just when you increase demand, there tends to be pricing pressure on something, on wherever it may be. But you know, the good news is with batteries at scale, either like the mega pack, which is sort of, you know, where you do sort of gigawatt hour class, you know, battery packs, or the summation of Powerwalls at users' homes where the Powerwalls all communicate and you can have 10,000 Powerwalls all operating together to buffer the power. This is going to be extremely helpful in increasing total electricity availability, because you just have to buffer it, especially with renewables. Obviously, with wind and solar, the buffering is essential. I mean, if you like to say like SpaceX and Starlink satellite constellation, which is a majority of all satellites currently in operation, they're all solar battery powered, and they're in low Earth orbit, so they go through Earth's shadow. You can think of Earth as just really a big satellite. My prediction is that long-term most electricity will be generated with solar and with a solar battery combination. The solar energy is just absurdly gigantic, with a gigawatt of solar incidence per square kilometer, roughly. Or thought of another way, when you do all the math, it sort of roughly works out to like a gigawatt hour per day, if I recall correctly, per square kilometer. It's a lot.
Yeah. Yes, we should react. Yes. That's a lot.
I mean, it would be a frozen ice ball at roughly 3 degrees Kelvin if it wasn't for the sun. It would be pitch dark and cold as hell.
Fortunately, it's not. Yes, right.
Fortunately, we have the sun, which is throwing off absurd amounts of energy, and it's zero maintenance, and it just shows up every day. It's amazing.
Yeah. Yes.
People always ask me about, like, what do you think about fusion? I'm like, we have a fusion reactor in the sky that just shows up every day.
Yeah.
Why do you need to build one on the ground? That doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. So
Like,
with
fusion's
that thought,
definitely solvable, but it's pointless.
so Elon, with that thought, and as you imagine the energy system of the future, what role do you think? I'm going to bring it back to just kind of practical terms here, so I'm sorry for that. But what do you think the role of the grid and a utility like PG&E is in causing that lowest cost societal transition to a decarbonized economy? What do you think our role is, and what advice do you have for us?
Well, I think generally leaning in the direction of solar and wind combined with battery storage, because of the intermittent nature of solar and wind, is generally the right approach. And I think a lot of that is happening. I mean, we see the growth of renewables in the United States and actually in most places in the world, including China, is very high. So if that trend continues, and it probably will, then I think we're headed for a good place. I would just say, whatever your demand predictions are for electricity, I suspect they are too low.
Yeah.
So I recommend.
I'm taking a note, Elon.
Much higher demand.
Yeah. So Elon, I know you kind of have a love-hate relationship with artificial intelligence. On one hand, you love it. On one hand, it's scary. What role do you think AI has in this grid of the future and the energy system of the future?
Yeah, I would say just I'm worried about AI as, it just, if you've got some sort of digital super intelligence, things can go wrong potentially. It's just something we should not be cavalier about. We should be careful with digital superintelligence. Digital superintelligence may be the biggest existential risk that humanity has ever faced. So I think we need to be very careful with it, and I think we should have regulatory oversight, because it is a potential danger to the public, and whenever we have something that is a potential danger to the public, we have regulatory oversight. So on the plus side, I mean, AI has the potential for creating a society of abundance. So in the positive AI scenario, there will be no shortages of goods and services. There will be almost free. Yeah, it's a strange way to think about it, but I recommend reading Ian Banks' The Culture books. That's probably the best future envisioning of AI that I've seen.
Oh, good.
But yeah, digital superintelligence combined with robotics will essentially make goods and services close to free in the long term.
Yeah, and I think they should be invisible for sure, and easy and automated. And so actually we've got Schneider Electric and Microsoft here in the room. They're going to be talking about our partnership on our distributed energy resource management system and how important that is to make those the optimized. I think of that as the optimized grid, that those services happen very invisibly, that outages are a thing of the past because our resources are more dynamic than that, and they're optimized in some way to provide service where required. And we're very excited about that. Elon, I've got a whole host of people here. I'd love to take a question from the audience, and then I'm going to do a speed round with you. You okay for a couple more minutes?
That's good. Sure.
Okay. All right. Let's take a question from the audience. I think I have one here in the front row, please. I've got Scott Harden here from Schneider Electric, and he has a question for you, Elon.
Thank you, Patty. Elon, Scott Harden, CTO at Schneider Electric. One of the things that I'm delighted to hear in your conversation with Patty is the partnership that you have established here. And I think that that's unique in the industry. And we have a very similar partnership with PG&E, and we think it's incredibly important, because as we drive forward with energy transition, it's going to be partnerships like this that are going to truly move the needle. What I'm curious about is, from your perspective, more broadly, what is working with other utilities, what is not working, and what could we do collectively to essentially facilitate greater collaboration like we see here?
Well, I think just generally recalibrating expectations for electricity demand is very important. You know, if you have a fairly static electricity demand, which has been the case in the U.S. for a while, it hasn't changed a lot. Then having projects take a long time is okay in that scenario. But in a rapidly changing scenario where electricity demand is increasing, we have to move much faster. So we need to bring the timescale of projects in sooner and have a high sense of urgency. So that's it. My biggest concern is that there's insufficient urgency, and people just don't understand how much electricity demand there will be, and it's really going, like I said, it's going to be 3 times what it currently is.
Elon, that is great advice. I mean, I think we are definitely taking a note here. I'm going to be the last person to doubt your predictions of the future. So, but I really think that is very important takeaway for us at pace of change, and why we've written this 10-year strategy. It's not a 50-year strategy, it's a 10-year strategy. And that means we have to have a grid that is ready for the demand that electrification will bring, and having a regulatory construct that enables that, and a engineering team who goes from a mindset of operate and maintain to a mindset of growth. And in an industry that has had limited growth over the lifetimes of the engineers who have worked for our companies, that's a big change. That's a big change. Yeah. I'm just curious, Elon, I'm going to fish for a compliment here. Anything PG&E is doing good? Anything we're doing well with you, Elon?
Well, I think we've had a number of really productive projects. You know, the big battery installations have been great. And just generally the dialogue has been really good between our teams. And I appreciate the help with the Powerwall, with the backup switch, which is really helpful for, you know, if customers do get caught in a wildfire or for some reason electricity is down, then we need to cut off the home power from the grid, so it's contained, so that the Powerwall can power the house. So it's actually important from a safety standpoint and everything, and I appreciate your help in enabling that. That's a big deal for people in need.
Yeah, thank you, Elon. Thank you for finding something good to say. I appreciate that. You had to dig deep. Okay, okay, Elon. We're going to do a speed round now. We're going to do a speed round. Something overrated.
What's overrated? I mean, some of these things that are overrated are obvious at this point, like, you know, Web 3.0 or whatever, and NFTs, but everybody knows that at this point.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Me, I'm overrated.
Nice, nice. Okay, so tell us something that you're excited about for the future. What's something that excites you for the future, Elon?
Well, I think it would be very exciting to see humanity back on the moon, and to have the first people on Mars. And, you know, for us to be a spacefaring civilization, I think that would be a very exciting future. You know, I think we are moving towards sustainability, and I think that'll make everyone a lot more comfortable as we move to a sustainable energy future. You know, on the positive side of AI, I think there will be some amazing things that AI creates for us.
Those are all very exciting things, Elon. And you know, when I think about, there was well, I often think that if Thomas Edison came and took a walk with me today, he'd recognize most of the stuff, but not for long. And in no short order because of you, Elon, and your vision and your commitment to a future that was not true when you stated it the first time. You had a lot of doubters. We talked a little bit before you joined about the Golden Gate Bridge and how there were a lot of doubters about the Golden Gate Bridge, and now we can't imagine a world without it. I can't imagine a world without Tesla, and I'm so thankful for your leadership. We're thankful for your partnership. We at PG&E are dedicated to being with you, and we're going to do our darndest to keep pace with you, and we're always going to listen closely when you give us good advice. So thank you so much for being with us. Please, everybody, give it up for Elon Musk.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you to say.
Don't hang up. I got to take a selfie with Elon. Here, but I need my phone real quick. Thank you. I'm famous for my selfies, Elon. If you'll humor me, I'm just going to take one real quick. Sure. And then I'll take one with all of you, too, because I like you, too, you know.
All right.
Oh, wait. What? Oh, wait. I'm almost ready. There we go.
Okay.
Thank you, Elon. Very good. I'm going to take one with all of you.
Nice to speak to you. Thank you.
All right. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. That was fun. Now, our program continues. Yes, if I could have a little help with the chairs. We're going to regroup here. Our next discussion, we're actually going to break some news here with everybody. I'm going to let my voice of God announce our guests here.
Thank you, Patty. Please welcome to the stage Annette Clayton, Chief Executive Officer, Schneider Electric North America.
Come on up, Annette.
And Daryl Willis, Corporate Vice President, Energy and Resources Industry for Microsoft.
Thank you. Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you guys for being here. Well, I have to
let us follow Elon.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
You're going to do great. You're going to kill it. So, first of all, the truth be told, these are two great friends of mine. Annette and I go way back. I think I got chewed out by Annette sometime in my early career at General Motors. She was the big boss, and I was a little plant manager who had a lot to learn from this woman. So she was a very good coach and counsel to me in our years at General Motors, and now as CEO of Schneider, we're working so closely together. And Daryl and I are both Cardinal, Stanford Cardinal. You can't say an S, I guess, but
right.
Whatever, however you say it. We both went to Stanford, so that's our bond. But more importantly, Daryl and I had met a few times, and then one day I came into, I think we were at, what was that conference? Anyhow, we were at a conference together, and I walked in and I sat down with Daryl, and I said, Daryl, PG&E needs you. Please, can you help us get to the future faster? And Microsoft and Daryl and Satya and the team have just very much stepped up to join us and help us accelerate our path to the future. And so as we think about the whole spirit of the R&D paper and our pathway and the goal to go from today to tomorrow, we don't just want to chit-chat today. We want to announce some news. A press release came out this morning that PG&E and Schneider Electric have partnered to have the first and most leading distributed energy resource management system powered by Azure, the Microsoft Cloud, so that we can go faster and further in managing distributed resources. And let me just make a point about what that means. September 6th last year, we had record heat and temperatures. I mentioned that the virtual power plant from the Tesla Powerwalls played a role in saving the day. But some of you may remember, there was a moment, and I'll never forget it. We were standing in our control room. We were watching the load curve go up. It was September 6th, and it was getting dangerously, dangerously close. The CAISO called us, told us to arm 1 million customers to drop transmission load because we were going to have a brownout in California. And so we used a tool in that moment, the emergency broadcast system. Anyone in California will remember. And thank you for responding. You got a text message that said, please conserve energy. And gosh darn it, Californians responded. Thank you very much. You saved the day and saved the grid, but let's not do that very often. So we have an idea that there's a way to actually use technology and maximize and leverage everything that Elon was just talking about, leverage those distributed resources to make a seamless ability to supply energy on the hottest days at the lowest societal cost, that is possible thanks to the announcement we just made today about this partnership with Schneider Electric and PG&E to show the way of how we can have a smart digital energy platform that is seamless and invisible to customers, yet provides unlimited value. So that's the news today. Join me in thanking Schneider and Microsoft for their good work.
Thank you.
So Annette, you and I have been working on this for a while. Share with everyone why you think it's important and what the role that this will play.
I feel, Patty, my job is done. You're wearing Schneider green. And you've done the
I told her we should have
release.
switched jackets today.
I can leave the stage. Well, if I could take just a step back before taking a step in. One is congratulations on the R&D strategy, because not all of you may be aware of how innovative it is in itself and that you've made it public. That is an innovation in its own. Most utilities are quite shielded about the challenges they may be facing. And I think asking for the overt innovation is an innovation in itself. So really congratulations for that. Thank you. One of the things that we noticed, and Patty, you remember we met back at the World Economic Forum in the beginning of the year. And one of the things Patty and I realized is that she's innovating on one side of the meter and we're innovating on the other side of the meter. And that innovation really needs to intersect in a much more powerful way. And I think that's really exactly what we're doing. Instead of playing our traditional roles, we're really trying to understand the end-to-end experience of not only a customer, but how energy is actually consumed. So we're talking a lot about what's on the customer side and how do we leverage that to give situational awareness to the utility. And so this eco-structured demand response, eco-structured DERMS, is really what we're talking about here, to allow you to look at the assets at the edge of the grid and make that grid much more powerful for the utility. It's a shining example of what we have to do across the country. And to everybody in this room, how we help PG&E innovate will be copied across the country. PG&E faces more challenges probably than any other utility in the United States, right? And they have more demanding customers who are more progressive in their thoughts. We have an acceleration of decarbonization in the state of California. And at Schneider, we like to say California's our state. We love California because they think the way we think. And if we think about the problems and the way we solve them for PG&E, it will shape the way we solve it for the country, because everyone will eventually have the same challenges, Patty, that you're innovating and solving here today. So I just want to thank PG&E and thank this room for the work that you're doing, because it will mean something to the country.
Yeah, thank you, Annette. I couldn't agree with you more. You know, just a couple data points. We have, last year in California, 23%, or actually in our service area specifically, 23% of new vehicles sold were electric last year. When I tell my peers that across the nation, they go, what, really? It's actually happening? And yes, it's actually happening. Or 23% of new vehicles sold, almost 500,000 electric vehicles on our road. That is the equivalent of 9,000 megawatts of capacity. So today we think of it just as demand. But I imagine it as supply, and with a platform like we're talking about, they can be leveraged at the right times. We're not talking about tapping everyone's battery every day, but on September 6th last year, that 9,000 megawatts would have come in handy, but we couldn't tap it. So there's a potential there that's really exciting that this platform will provide for us. We can't see it today. I mean, truthfully, Tesla knows more about my usage at my home than I do. Well, I do because they tell me about it, but I don't learn it from myself at work. We've got a solar and a power wall at my house. We bought the house in the East Bay, and it had that already installed. And it's been a real eye-opener for me, the value and the benefit of distributed resources and the ability to see it, but it is under-leveraged today. Only I decide how it works and when I can do good, and I don't have the same visibility as a consumer and as a customer as a grid operator has. And so I could be so much more beneficial and would want to be. if it were more dynamic, and that's what this DERMS platform will provide.
That's right. And we heard Elon say, he said triple. I know if you have the number of electric vehicles that you're anticipating in this state, you will already double your peak demand.
Yeah.
So triple
unchecked
is probably about right.
Yeah, it's an exciting forecast. So, Daryl, tell us what you think is the significance of this agreement and the role that Microsoft plays with this platform.
I will, but I wanted to say that, Patty, I remember meeting you probably 4 years ago when I worked for Google. And I thought you were a very unusual power and utility CEO.
I've heard
and
that
I'm
before,
so glad. And I'm so glad you're in this industry, because I think it is overdue for an increase in the velocity of what it does, and also some reimagining how it does things. And I remember talking to Satya, our CEO, after he met you at the White House, and he said, I met this woman who was amazing and she inspired me. You need to go and figure out who she is and how we can work with her. And so I say all of that to say that for us, partnership is absolutely important. Everything we do is about partnership and figuring out who are the most unusual and most important people for us to partner with. And so PG, Schneider Electric squarely fit in that category. One of the things that we talk about at Microsoft, and I get challenged on as the leader of energy and resources, is to figure out who are the biggest and most important customers and partners on the planet, and how can we work with them. And that's why we're here. There are several things that are important to us. We're a big consumer of energy, and we're going to continue to use a lot more energy, particularly as we think about generative AI and all that's happening there. But we also have some ambitious decarbonization goals. And we also realize that we cannot do it on our own. So we are on this journey with you for the long haul. And we realize that the more we can do together, the better off we're all going to be.
That's right. The more we do it, the better. And you know, we did a session together, our teams. We had our teams gather up in Redmond, and we did really just a working session. And I think the inspiration for everyone who's here, and one of the messages we want all of our attendees, both virtually and in person, to know, is that partnership actually takes work. It takes a commitment of dual resources and our most valuable resource of time, putting it in together to imagine a future together, and then building the brass tacks plan. The real deal pathway from here to there is extremely important. And so today is not the last day that we will be gathered, but we'll be gathered in smaller groups working on very specific action plans together about that. You know, Annette, as you think forward, what do you feel like are some of the biggest challenges as we tackle this platform and the platform design together?
I think for me, the technology exists. I think the ability to actually have demand response, to orchestrate both the supply and the demand side. We've always spent a lot of time talking about the supply side. We've spent less time on the demand side. So this concept of orchestrating them, I think, is really important. And you know, if you ask me what I think is most important, it's scale and speed. And I think the point that Elon made is really, really important. We have to move much faster. And this concept of piloting hundreds of things is interesting. But I liked Quinn. I have Quinn's mic on, so I'm inspired by
Oh, yes,
Quinn.
okay. You have a shared symphony. I feel some resonance coming on.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. I like this concept of really how to drive scale through prototypes. And I think we prototype DERMS a lot. I mean, Patty, even before you came to PG&E, you were prototyping DERMS. You were sunsetting fossil fuels and creating demand response capability at consumers. And so we have the ability to do this at scale. So for me, it's really about speed. And I always think about energy in the Ds. The digitization is super important. Decarbonized, obviously, we talk a lot about that. Decentralized, we're going to see more and more decentralized. And then I think it was Quinn that brought it up, democratized. We need to have access to renewable energy. And a lot of our projects in Schneider are really focused on making sure we're democratizing access to renewable energy.
Yeah, you know, as the provider of last resort, you know, we have an obligation to serve, and frankly, I think of it as a privilege to serve all people. And we don't want anyone left behind in this transition. And so I do think the investor-owned utility plays a very important role. We fundamentally have a wire and a pipe connected to every building in our service area, which is 2/3 of California, serving 16 million people. We want to make sure no one is left behind in that transition. And so having an optimized system and a way to be able to use it for the greatest good and this lowest societal cost in this transition is fundamentally going to be enabled by this platform that we've talked about today.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And so, Daryl, what do you think the biggest challenges are as we move forward?
Very similar to what Annette said. I think the biggest one for me, as I think about it, and the one that keeps me up at night is speed, pace, the pace at which we do things. We're great at laying out plans and very, as an industry, slow to execute. So I think the pace absolutely matters. I think partnership matters. I think about the fact that you've invited us here, and that I was with you in Las Vegas in October for the Innovation Conference. Us coming together is something that's very important. The third thing is ambition. I love your slide. It's the exact same slide you showed to Satya and the leadership team at Microsoft last May. And your mission and your vision and your ambition is having the courage to believe that things that aren't true today are possible is very, very important. And the last thing I'll say, Patty, is that from our standpoint, it is alignment around mission. I love what Schneider says around the fact that life is on. I love when I get an email from you, it says leading with love, and we talk at Microsoft about empowering every organization and person on that planet to achieve more. And so all of that's alignment. We're all trying to do the same thing as we think about access to energy, the decarbonization of energy, the democratization of energy, and the availability is so important. And us working together, we can truly change the world. As you said, Quinn, as you talked about PG&E and took it all the way out to the 8 billion people on the planet, and the 10 billion people that'll be on the planet in 2050. We've got a lot of work to do. And it's not going to be easy, but together we can get it done. I've never seen companies like ours come together and make things worse. We can only make things better.
Somebody's out there thinking of an example, Daryl, for us, but they're the naysayers, and we're barreling through. Daryl, Microsoft has had a big year. I mean, it's been exciting to watch. The ChatGPT purchase, acquisition, partnership, it is so exciting to think about. But also, I think Elon talked a little, is it scary? I don't know. But as you think about the role of Microsoft and this incredible regenerative learning model, how does that fit into the grid, and what role do you think it could play in the future of this clean energy transition?
I think about a couple of things. One is I think about just how it fits squarely with our mission. We want to enable every person and organization on the planet to do more, and we see artificial intelligence as an enabler for that. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is that with the advent of these large language models and ChatGPT and all that goes with it, generative AI, we see it as a partner and not a replacement. It's a partner. It's there to help enable, to accelerate the journey. And so to answer your question with a finer point, the third thing I would say is that I believe that any success we have around DERMS, any success we have around 24/7, 365, any success we have around the delivery of energy, when we look back in 3, 4, 5 years' time, AI will be at the center of it. And anything that's good has a dark side. And our challenge as we think about artificial intelligence is to make sure we are responsible in how it's deployed, and that, as Elon said, and we agree at Microsoft, the regulations are in place as well to ensure that it is used to do more good.
Maybe a couple practical examples of AI. One is, you talked about using the emergency broadcast system to actually curtail energy. But one of the things we're doing in Schneider is we have this thing called virtual power plants, right? Yes. Where all these assets that are on the edge of the grid have the ability to generate supply. So what we've done is we've used AI in order to drive that virtual power plant in times of need. So I think it's a good application of AI. Another example of AI is the overlay on the load center itself. So literally, you can take a picture of your load center in your house, your breaker box, and it can tell you, it can analyze it, and it can go and tell you whether or not you have the capacity to put in an EV charger, right? So these are very simple, very pragmatic uses of AI that we're doing today. Actually, some of them with you.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And you know, I'm thinking about just at this question of pace and how we're talking about how we have to go faster. And Daryl, I'll give some props to the Microsoft suite of tools. You know, we did a hackathon of robotic process automation, just using existing tools within Microsoft to free up time for people to do higher value work. And we had all these great ideas and people implemented all sorts of things. And we're trying to figure out how to do an AI hackathon inside the company so we can see what are the best applications, because the best ideas come from the people closest to the work, who have the daily struggle, who have, I mean, the three of us can come up with some pretty good ideas. So, you know, us aside, most of the ideas, the best ideas are going to come from people who are struggling on a day-to-day basis, trying to keep pace with the demand for the work that they're doing. I know at PG&E, we've had an increase in demand for capacity and really figuring out how to interconnect both resources and customers faster is a huge priority for us. And using, you know, just the simple robotic process automation tools to free up engineers so they can do the value add that only an engineer can do is one tool. But I can only imagine how with our platform and with the tools powered by Azure and the DERMS platform that we'll be able to more quickly identify what the real capacity need is. Let me tell you one quick story, and it will just kind of tell how what a challenge it is for us. So we had Tesla actually requested a supercharger station, 3.8 megawatts, and so our planners looked and said, oh, we don't have 3.8 megawatts available on that circuit. We'll get to that in the next 3 to 4 years. So that's not very fast. We know that. We resemble that remark. But the engineers are just saying that's how much backlog of demand we have. However, when we dug in, and Quinn and his team did an analysis of that circuit to really understand, in fact, how frequently are we unable to serve the 3.8 megawatts? It was 2 days a year. 363 days of the year, we could serve 3.8 megawatts. But because we planned for the peak plus, that's our planning system. So we have to reimagine our standards and really get a lot more sophisticated about our tools. Weren't designed to break down every hour of every day. Our smart meters help us see now what's the actual demand on any given hour. We now have information we never had before. And the game used to be pretty simple. You build 15% more than you ever will need. Well, when you are hearing 3 times load growth, you can't afford to build 3 times more. And I can't afford to do a new substation for every Tesla supercharger. We need to be able to optimize the use of those other resources to serve that peak so that our existing assets can deliver that energy whenever and wherever it's needed. That's a new game. That's not the game we've been in, but that's the game we need everybody's help reimagining and delivering.
Yeah, I mean, I can only agree. I mean, we see a lot of our customers actually solving that very problem with microgrids, right? With some kind of energy as a service. It's decarbonized, it's decentralized, it's digitized, and it's there when you obviously need it. And then Elon talked a lot about storage, so I won't go there. But microgrids are a great example, and I think you showed one earlier. And by the way, there was some Snyder stuff in that white box.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
You couldn't see it, but it was in the box.
Good job, Annette.
Can I add one thing?
Yeah, please,
Patty, because I think it's important to say this. From my standpoint, I get to talk to a lot of companies around the world, power and utility companies, oil and gas companies, and mining companies, and the companies who don't embrace artificial intelligence ultimately will get left behind. It is not going away. Companies that don't realize they have to move from the closet to the cloud will get left behind. Companies that don't think that they need to partner with unusual and untraditional partnerships will get left behind. The future is all about AI, it's about the cloud, and it's about partnership. And if you're not on board with all three of those things, and lastly, what underpins all of that is leadership. And the organizations that are making the most progress are because there's C-suites that are leaning in and out front and driving this from the top. It's being supported from the bottom, but it's being driven from the top. It's so important.
Well, and I think it'll bring joy, frankly, to all of my coworkers. You know, those distribution engineers, and just to be clear, I love my distribution engineers, and they're doing a great job. But we need to support them with tools so that they can help do the value-added tasks. And I think that's the leadership from the top combined with the ingenuity and the innovation of our partners who are here today and who are online, who have the great ideas that we don't even know about, partnered with our problem statements, I think unlocks the full potential of what we can cause here in California. Now, we have a couple minutes left. I'd love to take some questions from the audience. Maybe we take one online as we get one in person. Oh, I have a micro. Why don't we take one? Oh, okay. We'll take one here in the audience, here from the second row here.
John Powers with Alexity. We're 3 hours in. I haven't heard the word startup yet. In the partnerships you talked about just now, what do you see as the role of startups?
Maybe I could start.
Please.
So we you know, I talked at the beginning about, you know, Patty and I realized that our innovations were intersecting, and we actually have a pretty large innovation at the edge group, and we've invested and acquired a number of companies that are actually engaging not only the customer experience on behalf of the utilities, but actually driving a lot of the software intelligence to actually create that DERMS value system. So this has come from the startup environment, and I could mention companies, you know, like Uplight or Qmerit or EV Connect, Energy Sage. These are companies that...
Oh my God, please don't tell me the power just went out.
It didn't.
True, it didn't. There, that was just like that. It was just a test.
I think that
the power did not go out, for the record. The screens were still on. Okay.
That was. It's true. I think somebody leaned on the switch.
I think that's
actually.
what happened.
But that was DERMS at work. No,
yeah, no, it was not.
No, I think actually startups have played a really big role in innovating in this space, and now we've created the opportunity to scale them. And I might say that we have attached with that is we have these amazing tailwinds, and I want to point back to Leslie's conversation earlier about all the tailwinds that have been created through the Department of Energy and not only their loan program, but just their injection in a more sustainable future. This is amazing. We're at an amazing time. And just maybe a personal note, and you've kind of inspired me with your question, and I do have Quinn's mic on. I wake up every morning and I put on this North Star, right? I put it on every morning and I think about, what I'm going to do for that day and how I'm going to drive, my personal work around this mission. And I just believe we're at this moment in time. And I know because 25 years ago, I launched the first electric vehicle. I was the president of Saturn. I launched the EV1. And despite what Elon says, it wasn't about range. It was about infrastructure. It was about charging. It was about customer sentiment. We are at this moment of time. It's so exciting where we have these tailwinds on policy. We have people that care. We have a whole generation that expects this from us. We're at this moment of time, and I'm still glad to be professionally active, right? While we're at this knee of the curve, we have a real chance to change the outcomes, and I know I'm personally dedicated to it. So thank you for your question.
Oh my gosh, Annette, what a great answer! Yeah. I think what I just heard is Annette Clayton had a breakthrough idea before Elon. Okay, Daryl, what do you want to respond to this startup question?
What I would say about startups is a couple of things. The first one is that we will not get to net zero by 2050 or sooner without startups, because a lot of the technology that's going to be required has to be created, and a lot of the risk associated with that needs to be invested in by companies like Microsoft, and it needs to be pursued by this ecosystem of startups. That said, we've, in the case of Microsoft, set aside $1 billion to invest in startups that are doing things that are risky and on the frontier. We also continue to work with Bill Gates' organization, Breakthrough Energy Ventures, to help provoke the startup community. And lastly, we're investing in organizations like Greentown Labs, which is the largest green tech and clean tech startup in North America. I was actually with Greentown Labs last Thursday in Boston, and we are actively involved with the organization in Houston. So there's a lot to do with startups, and they are essential part of the equation.
Yep. Also, Greentown Labs, really, really great incubation.
Yeah.
Well, and on behalf of PG&E to the startup community, and one of the main reasons we're here today is to tap into that ecosystem. We know that there are brilliant ideas out there, and we have very specific problems. And one of our goals, one of the key goals of having this R&D white paper and our problem statements clearly articulated is so that you know how best to channel that great idea and turn us into your best customer. You know, I think a lot of people think, oh, PG&E should invest in the startups. Actually, no. A startup needs two things. It needs funding, and there's a whole community for that, and it needs a customer. And we want to be that. We want to play that role so that we can best serve our customers. And so we don't want innovation to come here to get trapped in pilots. We want innovation to come to scale at PG&E. We want innovation to come and thrive at PG&E. We've been very clear today about our top problems. We've identified them. In fact, Dan's going to come up on stage and better articulate how we're going to enable you to engage in those top problems. And that's how we can solve this pathway and continue the True North journey. I love that. And that the travel to our True North strategy together at an accelerated pace. We are the bridge. You know, there's a saying, and it goes something like this. Great is the one who plants the trees whose shade they'll never know. And I would suggest that this room and everyone online, we're planting a lot of trees whose shade we may never know, but our children and our children's children will know the benefit of a decarbonized economy. Please don't plant those trees near the power lines. Let us celebrate the possibility that we are doing something spectacular together. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Annette and Daryl, for being with us in this partnership. We're going to do a selfie. Oh, yeah.
Please welcome our next speaker.
Oh, thank you. I'll grab that right after I do a selfie with my guest. Here, you two, come here.
All right.
Thank you. All right. Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Our next speaker is Dan Galani, Senior Manager, R&D Operations for PG&E.
All right. I was going to say good morning. Yes, technically it's still morning. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I think it would be the understatement of the day to say that those were a couple of really tough acts to follow. And I also acknowledge that I am standing between 300 people who are getting hungrier and hungrier and their lunch. So with that said, I will do my best to keep my comments succinct, challenge accepted. But we do have one more really important topic that we need to cover before the break. And that topic is, so what exactly happens after today's summit, and how can you all get engaged with us? So what I'm going to do really briefly is summarize a lot of what we've already discussed this morning. So as we mentioned, we went through a rigorous process where we really spent the better part of 6 months looking at our key strategic objectives and translating those into a core set of 70 R&D problem statements that we're going to need to address to be able to achieve those objectives. We took all those and we codified them in our R&D strategy report. And as you all know, we released that to the public about a month ago. And what we're here to do today, more than anything, as has already been mentioned, is to start to bring that to life. And to that end, we're going to get together in a series of breakout sessions after lunch. We're going to talk about all those problem statements in more detail and have good two-way dialogue around those. And as we do that, we hope and we fully expect that light bulbs are going to start to turn on in your heads, and you're going to start to say, I'm working on technology or solution X, Y, and Z, and really think that they can help address problem statement A, B, and C. And as those light bulbs start to turn on, we want to capture that. We want to know about that. We want you to send that to us. And so we have set up a portal to start to gather all of those ideas from you, and we'll talk about that more in a few minutes. But then what we'll do is, as we gather all of that, we'll take a look, we'll do a down select, and then we'll identify a subset of you that we want to invite in person to tell us more in a one-on-one setting, tell us more about yourselves, what you're working on, and how you think it can help. And so shout out there to the startups. We're very interested in all of you. And so that essentially is going to be what we call a series of Pitch Fest events that are going to happen in September. In terms of what we expect to come out of Pitch Fest in terms of opportunities and partnerships, for example, for technologies that progressed out of the conceptual phase but still need more co-development, demonstration, piloting, have key questions that need to be answered. First and foremost, what we hear from you in Pitch Fest, we expect will have a really strong impact in shaping our next very big wave of R&D projects through our EPIC program. For those of you who are not familiar with EPIC, it's our big central research development and demonstration program that's overseen by the CPUC for the electric side of the business. And the commission has set a budget for our next wave of EPIC, which is called EPIC 4 at $83 million. And we're hoping to have final sign-off to begin accessing those funds in the coming months. But we're in the process of planning that big portfolio of EPIC projects, and all of our EPIC projects are going to involve partnerships. We don't do any of this work by ourselves. We intend to have those projects selected and ready to go around the end of the year, and then early next year launch a series of RFPs to bring on vendor partners. So your participation in Pitch Fest will inform the scoping of our EPIC portfolio, which will then shape those partnership opportunities. All right. Beyond the EPIC program, we also, as Quinn mentioned earlier, have a lot of problem statements in the area of the gas system. And so we expect to also leverage our separate existing gas R&D program for that. Also have a number of other emerging technology programs with PG&E that we expect to be good mechanisms for partnerships as well. And then also as we get to know you and your solutions, what you're working on, we expect to identify opportunities for us to come together and jointly apply for various grant opportunities at the government level, both federal and state as well. And then beyond that, for things that have progressed out of R&D already, which we maybe just don't know about because they were pioneered in other industries, or it might be that other utilities are already using them. For those things that are more mature, we expect to move much more quickly and just doing very quick initial assessments before moving forward and making much bigger investment decisions to deploy those at scale with general budgets that are much bigger than our R&D budgets. So wanted to give you a flavor of the opportunities that we expect will come out of the Pitch Fest process, although that's certainly not an exhaustive set of examples there. All right, next wanted to talk about the specifics of the application process in the Pitch Fest. So the Pitch Fest is going to be from September 12th through the 14th. The application portal is live now. So there should be a QR code on your cards that you have that you got at registration. There's also a link on our website, but if anybody wants to scan that now, feel free to do that. That'll get you to our application portal. Application portal, again, will be live until August 11th, and then we'll take about 20 days to look at everything that's submitted and do that down select and determine who we want to invite to those Pitch Fest events. And so we'll notify everyone who's selected by August 31st. If invited, the event will be in San Ramon. It won't be at this facility. It'll actually be at a PG&E facility that's no more than 2 miles up the road here in San Ramon. And then they'll be grouped in half-day groups by initiative. So there will be, like, for example, a morning for wildfire, an afternoon for supply and load, et cetera, for each of the initiative areas that we covered this morning. In terms of who's going to be at the table, it'll be each of you selected technology providers individually meeting with PG&E, both our leadership and our subject matter experts, as well as a number of VCs that we intend to invite to sit in on those conversations as well. Lastly, on this slide, I'll say that we really hope that you all can attend in person, although if for whatever reason that's not going to work out, we will have a virtual participation option for the Pitch Fest as well. All right, next wanted to just do a quick overview of the information that we're looking for in your applications through the portal. This isn't an exhaustive list, but really just wanted to go over the key information. First, of course, we want a succinct overview of your solution and what it does. Then this next one's really important. We want to ensure that there's alignment with one or more of our problem statements. So it's going to be really important for you all not only to list what you think the applicable problem statements are, but to explain to us how you think what you're working on can help solve those problems. Then we also want to know whether you're already talking to PG&E, whether you've talked to us in the past. Admittedly, PG&E is a big place, so that information will be super helpful. And then, of course, if you already have any partnerships that are in the pipeline and planned with PG&E, we definitely want to know about that as well. Also want to get a sense for the current maturity of your solutions, want to get a sense for, in your own words, what your competitive advantages are. then the core competencies, not only of your key team members, but specifically those folks on your team that would be working with PG&E. And then want to get a better sense for specifically what kind of an engagement or project you would propose between yourselves and ourselves, including the earliest that you'd be able to start, as well as any constraints around that. And then again, as I alluded to before, we want to get a sense for who is going to be available to attend PitchFest in person, and highly encourage that. All right. Sorry. Next slide. Sorry. There we go. All right. In terms of the things that we are going to be looking for and focused on as we evaluate all of these applications that we're going to be getting, we want to understand the alignment with our problem statements. As I said, we want to understand the potential degree of impact. As Patty mentioned, we are looking for breakthrough thinking and breakthrough solutions. Those often do not have just modest incremental impacts, they have step change impacts. We're really going to be focusing on things that have the potential to have step change impacts. And then solution readiness for deployment is also going to be key as well. We want to focus on things that have progressed out of those initial conceptual stages, and at the very least are ready for a rigorous lab demonstration, if not a field demonstration. A couple other things I wanted to point out that I forgot to mention on this slide. When you submit your applications, there will be an option to upload supplemental information, supplemental documents that you might have. I think it's really important to stress that what you enter in the fields needs to stand alone and be complete. We expect a big volume of applications, and it may not be feasible for us to comb through all of the supplemental documents that are uploaded. With that, yeah, I think one other thing, a disclaimer, I'm just, the lawyer hat in me is saying we wanted to mention that for everything that you upload into your application, we ask kindly that you not send anything to us that is proprietary or confidential, since at this early stage, we're not going to be signing non-disclosure agreements. Of course, if and when formal partnerships are put in place after the fact, we will ensure that those protections are appropriately covered, but won't be signing NDAs at this initial stage. So please do not share anything that you think is proprietary or confidential. We're looking forward to all of your ideas. We tried to make this as simple as possible and just capture the key information. Hopefully it's already at your fingertips, and my team tells me this shouldn't take more than 15 or 20 minutes for you to fill out your application. So we're very much looking forward to everything that you submit, looking forward to talking to folks more in PitchFest, and forming partnerships to really move things forward in a lot of the critical areas that we've talked about today. With that, I think I'll channel what Jason and Patty both mentioned earlier. While we might not be your lead investor, we want to be your best customer. And what that looks like is working together hand in hand every step along the way to take your solutions to scale with you.